Hello and welcome to episode 41 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is May 14th, and together with Robert and Goran, we're here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Today we will focus again a little more on data-related topics. For this, we have invited Roman back to the show, who has created yet another beautiful tutorial on GitHub that he will walk us through in more detail. But as always, before we go there, let's quickly take a look at some of the news from this week. Let me share my screen here. I hope this works. And what I want to start with is, I think even last week, we already had a few additions in the SAP HANA hardware certified directory. And well, the trend continues, I would say. So we have now we have 118 solutions listed here in the hardware directory, and some new additions came in with our HANA large instances. There we now have a few more machines that are HANA certified that also are working with this Optane memory, that have additional CPU sizes and stuff like that. And I think this just shows Microsoft's investments there, that they're really trying to provide a lot of choices for customers so they can easily grow their investments in Azure and make sure that you have a fitting SAP infrastructure in place to run your SAP HANA systems. The next thing, we had talked about backup in our previous episodes. At first, we talked about Azure backup for SAP HANA. Then Robert had a nice overview of the different ways how you do backup. And now we have a new tool, the Azure Application Consistent Snapshot tool, that is mainly targeted for Azure NetApp files and our HANA large instances, where we enable you to create snapshots of the environment.
Mm-hmm. Consistent snapshot. Yeah. The tool is going in direction to actually, we discussed about it in what application consistent actually means. So the tool is sending the message or event to the database. Hey, I'm planning to do some snapshot. Then database will do something like save points or whatever, prepare everything. Yeah. And then a snapshot will happen. So then from that perspective, we will have the database consistent. And this is very important when we are creating snapshot on database disks, yeah, or database volumes, better to say. Yeah? And this tool is actually doing exactly that.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's a nice addition to the tools that we have in place or that are already available. Then you just brought up a very interesting other functionality or another information about Azure Ultra Disks.
Yeah, I think we all agree that Ultra Disk is our favorite managed disk, but unfortunately they are very from performance perspective and from options perspective, dynamic sizing from IOPS and the throughput. But unfortunately, they have a little bit higher price tag. Yeah, and now we are announcing that we will drop the price by 65%. Yeah. I didn't play it with the pricing and see how that reflects to average, let's say, SAP landscape. But it's very, very good news because Ultra Disks are very nice. I think Goran already tested a lot with Ultra Disks, so he can maybe refer much more.
Yeah. So we're just also with one customer migrating to Azure, and they're doing the SLO splitting process when they move to Azure. And then during that split process, there's a huge push on the log disk, on the undo disk of the Oracle, for example. And they want to use the premium. Okay, fine, but still we have those write accelerated, but still with the limit of 20,000 IOPS, which is not enough. And I try Ultra Disk, they really rocks. They rock, really. They actually offer much more. Of course, we're using MV2 series, the top 1416, and they really, you get the maximum. I mean, the only limit here is the VM limit on the storage for the uncached disk, which is basically 80,000 for the M416. I'm just looking 80,000 IOPS and 2,000 megabytes, and you get them, and you get those IOPS. We need an IOPS more here under millisecond latency. Really, it's just
Cool.
works and it rocks. Really, I love it. I would merit the Ultra Disk. Really,
Yeah,
really.
but I think it's really amazing the breadth of storage solutions that we have. So
Yeah.
I guess for some customer, premium disks are perfectly fine, striping them and stuff like that. For other customers or other use cases, ANF is so Azure NetApp Files is really a beautiful solution. And with Ultra Disks now, obviously, we also have a huge variety of things that we can address. And now, if we are really having a 65% reduction in price, that sounds
on throughput, on provision throughput. And this because on Ultra Disk price you create from three segments: from size, from throughput, and from IOPS. And throughput is very important because throughput is in general the most expensive part always. Yeah. So now we are dropping the price on throughput, which means I can somehow play a little bit more. When I need more throughput, I can go up and go down and so on. So it's much more attractive. Yeah.
Cool. Great.
I mean, nice. This what you Robert mentioned. You can change the tiers, performance tier, IOPS and throughput without the application downtime, and you do not need to stripe it as well. You know, like we have to do it on a premium disk. You know, we need to stripe it to get more IOPS and throughput, and which is an admin effort, right? So you basically you can even increase if you need more. Okay, pay I guess more. Downsize it after some peaks, you know, without any downtime for the app, and which is much more simple for customers.
Cool. The next one is ZRS for Azure Managed Disks, now in public preview. Robert, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way, the best candidate for commenting that is Goran. But I mean, it's what I like. It's now we can test much more regions, and this is much more. This is very attractive for all of us. Yeah, but this is as I mentioned, Goran can put more.
Yeah, so the public preview was already happened some months ago, but only in one region, East US to something. Yeah. So now it's really nice that those hero region like West in the especially in the West Europe as well. I mean the North Europe, West Europe are the hero region in the EMEA, for example. Okay, France as well, West US too as well is there. I mean it's very attractive for let's say sub-central services. It will definitely come on Windows clustering because it enables really. HA in the zones and in a simple way. I mean, shared disk is really simple, something which is already used from the beginning from SAP and supported. And shared disk also support the older version of the SAP 7.0x level. File share, unfortunately, not. So I think that's really a great news, and a customer can definitely sometime expect probably when we get the GA of this feature also to be a GA for the SAP zonal central services on Win cluster in simple way.
Because I think what is important, what Goran already mentioned, is when we're talking about zone redundant storage, we are talking about premium disk zone redundant storage, also standard, but premium from SAP context is very important. Yeah. And now we will have zone redundant storage, but we already have shared, but automatically sometime we'll have then shared zone redundant, and also Azure Fast is usually premium storage, and we are waiting for that for NFS 4. Something.
Yeah.
It's using premium storage, and when we have zone redundant, then we have complete package. And I think when we have this when we have this generalizability, then probably we'll have other features coming soon.
Yeah, and that's interesting because zone redundant could be a non-shared and shared as well, right? So that opens some additional use cases for even non-shared stuff. I'm just thinking, cool.
Yeah. Great, good. Then on to the next thing. I also thought this was quite interesting. So obviously right now we see all the Gartner Magic Quadrants, and there's a Magic Quadrant for endpoint protection. And if you remember, we had Evren a few weeks back here on the show talking about this whole zero trust model, how this relates to, or how this can be implemented in the SAP context. And here in this Magic Quadrant, Microsoft is a clear leader here in the endpoint protection platform space. And I think this also really just echoes or confirms or strengthens what Evren mentioned and talked about, how really the different functionalities that Microsoft brings in here on the Azure platform, how they can help protect and really secure your investments that you're putting to run SAP on Azure. With this, let's make a small switch. We had talked about or quickly talked about Azure Static Web Apps in the past in one of our shows or episodes, that this is really a nice way how you can create an application, how you can actually also leverage different frameworks to create web pages, how you can actually do this in a beautiful DevOps way. So there are integrations in how you can really start from GitHub, how you can then have built pipelines, how you can deploy this to your Azure site. And when we talked about this was still all in public preview, I think, and now it's really GA, and similar like in the preview, there are really great tutorials available that help you to get started with this. Obviously, you can do this all here with a free trial account. There's actually also a free tier available, so similar like what was there in the public preview. There's a free tier available, how you can really run through this whole process, how you can then host your application or create and deploy your applications and make them available via Azure. It's really a nice step how you can quickly get started. So I think that's definitely something that I would recommend.
One question: what is different between Azure Static Web Apps and Azure Web Apps? What did static refer to? Do you know?
That's a good question. I don't know.
One page applications, or it's Roman, do you know maybe?
Oh, good question.
Okay, let's research that till next video series.
That's a good idea to really find out the differences between the tools. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. But it's nice here. Example is with Visual Studio Code, which is free. So meaning it's also Microsoft is lowering the entrance here. There is no need to buy something or from the
I mean, regarding Visual Studio Code, if you take any of our videos, recent videos in development community, everything Visual Studio Code.
Yeah.
Nobody's using Visual Studio. I mean, and probably they are using Visual Studio in background somewhere for some projects, but Visual Studio Code is really explosion of options and extensions and everything. It's amazing.
There's one blog that I recently saw where there was an add-in from Logic Apps and Visual Studio, so not Visual Studio Code, but really Visual Studio, where they had a development environment in Visual Studio that allowed you to really work with Logic Apps. But yeah, you're right. Other than that, I really think there's a huge focus on Visual Studio Code. However, Logic Apps is a beautiful way to go to the next topic. I mean, Azure Static Web Apps are obviously development tools where you really need to be a developer to some extent. Obviously, with Logic Apps, it's a little different. I mean, this already goes in the low-code area where you really can drag and drop functionalities. And during build, there's an opportunity to schedule a 30-minute one-on-one session with the product managers of Logic Apps. So I think if you have already some projects started with Logic Apps, or if you have some questions or scenarios that you want to discuss with the Logic App teams, this is really, I think, a perfect opportunity to schedule a meeting with the team and then have 30-minute sessions with them and discuss your scenarios. Going on from Logic Apps, the Power Platform has a new, has a development series, and they're really talking about in this case, modernizing the IoT or Azure IoT functionalities with the Power Platform. It's a actually really nice way that shows that the whole Power Platform actually is not really something that is standalone, but it is very well integrated in lots of other Azure services. So I think we talked about the integration of the AI builder and some other cognitive services and stuff like that. And here it's really about how can you leverage IoT, how you can leverage Azure functions and orchestrate really all of this in the Power Platform, how you can work together with Power Automate and call Azure functions, how you can have the user interface with Power Apps. So it's a really nice series that guides you through the functionalities that come with the Power Platform and really show how you can leverage other Azure services in this context. Speaking of the Power Platform, Roman has not only done some beautiful things that we'll talk about in a minute about Synapse and data, but he also created a beautiful tutorial on how to use Power Apps with an SAP system and using the ERP connector. So as you know, the Power Platform has different ways how to connect to an SAP system. There's a way using Power Automate Desktop where you can really simulate an SAP GUI. Then there's the way to use OData services via, for example, the custom connector. But then there's the very often used SAP ERP connector that allows you to connect to an RFC or a BAPI in your SAP system. And what Roman has done here, and maybe we'll have another session where he guides us through these steps, is he outlines how to connect to the very famous S-Flight model on the SAP system. And that's what I always like about Roman's blogs. He really starts from scratch. So where do I get my SAP system? How do I get started there? Then how do I install this on-premises data gateway, which is a prerequisite when you want to use the ERP connector, because there we are using the .NET connector to connect to the SAP system. Yeah, and again, he guides us through all the steps to configure, install everything, and then in the end, he has a nice Power application, Power Apps that, where is it, that shows the list of here of flights in Power App. So I think if you can spend a few minutes, it's definitely worth going over this blog as well, or this tutorial as well, and check out Roman's tutorial here. One last thing about the Power Platform, there was a very nice blog post from Sarah Lauer, who's a digital hero at SAP. And what I like there, she is a part of a Digital Heroes core team that works on some I don't know, custom projects or empowering other employees at SAP, sharing some tutorials and knowledge and stuff like that. So they have this gamification platform where they engage with users, where they have some missions and stuff like that. And yeah, apparently this Digital Heroes community is growing really fast at SAP, and I think they're really bringing together a lot of great ideas from other colleagues. But what I especially obviously like is that she's doing a lot of this with Power Automate and Power Apps. I mean, she's not a developer, and she's very vocal about that she's really not someone who comes with a developer background. But actually she found the Power Platform, and she saw that it's quite easy actually to build applications, develop applications with Power Automate and Power Apps. So I thought that was also quite interesting to see from and to read here from Sarah about this. Then, Azure icons or Azure architecture icons. I guess some of you have seen that the Azure logo has a new logo. Maybe I should have opened this, but in addition to the Azure logo, there are obviously lots of other Azure services that have logos, and there was an update, so you can download this public service icons zip file that has 26 icons on different logos that you can then use in your diagrams. So for me, this is something similar like on the SAP side, where we have these solutions diagrams from Bertram Ganz, who really has created some beautiful icons there, or consolidated this. Here is a list now of Azure icons that you can also leverage and use. Then there was a blog from Microsoft Digital or Microsoft IT on how Microsoft is using SAP telemetry with Microsoft Azure. So in this blog, they talk about, well, how in the past SAP was a really black box for them, so they didn't really know what was going on. So yeah, here it was, yeah, you didn't know really what happened. You knew what happened before and after the SAP system, but not really what happened in the SAP system. And now here with this new approach to really get insights in the processes of the SAP system, they could get this data, they can visualize this data, and basically show the users what is actually happening. So they talk here about taxation and how this information from the SAP system can now be visualized to really see where you are within your SAP system if a certain step has been or process has been triggered. So I thought that was also quite interesting to see how Microsoft is actually using SAP and really are getting insights into not only what happens outside the SAP system, outside the SAP system, but really also looking at the processes within an SAP system. Then two last things. We had talked about the ByDesign and Microsoft Teams integration already. And here Jan has now created a SAP micro-learning session where he basically in this video really shows live how the integration looks like, that really from Teams now you have access to ByDesign, that from Teams you can drill down into certain informations that are part of ByDesign. So for me, this was a really, I mean, it's only 3.5 minutes or 4 minutes. It's a quick video, but it's really nice to see what's actually possible, what you can do if you really integrate an SAP solution in Teams. And I thought that was quite interesting to see here. Good, one last thing from my side. Jürgen Müller has another Q&A session. So I very much liked the original or the first Q&A session with Jürgen Müller, where he really engaged with the community, where you could ask questions live in the chat, and then Jürgen would go through the list and try to answer these questions. And now on May 28th, here's another session. So you can just register. It's almost an hour long, and for me, I just really like the way how open he is there, how he's really trying to engage with the community, fully knowing that there will be some hard questions, but it's good that he's willing to talk to the community. So I thought that was really beautiful to see. So with this, finally, we are ready to hand over to Roman. Roman had created another tutorial, so he's really good creating tutorials right now, and again, really detailed and very step-by-step tutorials. And in this tutorial, well, he talks about the integration with Synapse and an SAP system. But I'm sure, Roman, you can talk about this much better. So maybe let's hand over to you. Maybe you can quickly introduce yourself again for those who don't know you yet. And then I'm looking forward to the demos that you have prepared.
Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Roman Broich. I'm a cloud solution architect in the German OCP organization. So one commercial partner, teammate of Robert. And thanks for having me again. Happy to be here. And congratulations for episode number 40.
Thank you.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so really great presentations by the colleagues. So proud to be after Martin Möckle. And let's see how we go today. So yeah, last time in my last session, it was more like theoretical. Like I explained the tools, I explained how the connectivity worked. and what interfaces and partner solutions we have. And today I will present more demos and more hands-on, let's say, about, first of all, Power BI connectivity and Synapse to BW and SAP ECC. And I will guide you a little bit through my presentation today using a PowerPoint. And as always, feel free to jump in and ask some tough questions.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Just a second. Let me start my presentation. Okay. So what we will do today, I will focus on Microsoft and SAP data integration. And let's say this is a very simplified architecture, I would say, where we have two kinds of, let's say, SAP systems for analytics. This more or less is a new world. So I've chosen SAP S/4HANA as a source system for analytics and SAP BW for HANA. But nevertheless, it could be a SAP ECC as well. It could be a BW on HANA as well. Technically, it's a SAP NetWeaver system. Many customers already invested in BW on HANA or BW even Classic or for HANA, running their workloads on Azure, and of course would like to utilize these investments and, for example, would like to do some analytics using Power BI. That's why I'm presenting Power BI as well for customers who would like to do analytics on top of their existing investments into BW as the first option for analytics. And the second option would be to use SAP S/4HANA or SAP ECC or even BW as a data source for, let's say, extracting data for data integration patterns and to extract the data from S/4HANA or ECC using Azure Data Factory or Azure Synapse Analytics. So this will be, let's say, my presentation today. I will start with Power BI, a short overview, because I had a own internal demo system and I wanted to figure out what's under the hood between this kind of direct query and import query using MDX. And I've prepared a small example and a demonstration to, let's say, make it transparent what it means in practice if you're using a direct query or a import query with Power BI on top of BW. So this demo is sponsored by our colleagues from Fast Track. So many thanks to Martin Pankratz to supporting me when running the demos and the systems. And as well, Microsoft internally, when we are building, let's say, our demo scenarios, trying to rebuild, let's say, certain customer requirements for our tooling, including BW. One question was like, how do we get demo content for BW? Since we have a freshly installed BW system, and I did some research and I found a nice, let's say, demo model, which you can use, which is from 2009, but doesn't matter. So in case you would like to have some BW sandbox, or you would like to set up a BW system from the scratch and do some, let's say, demos on your own, or to figure out how, let's say, the integration works, for me, this BW demo model content worked very well, and as well was quite suitable for demonstrating certain specifics of BW. This is what I will demonstrate now, because if you are working with SAP departments, if you are working with your controlling department, heavy lifting financial stuff, which is done with BW at many of our clients, you will figure out that certain, let's say, logic in BW is very important for them for doing reporting. When we are connecting against a BW system, BW has certain, let's say, data store objects. There are physical data store objects and there are virtual data store objects. And between those data store objects and your, let's say, BI front end, there's a certain processing logic, which is the OLAP layer or OLAP processor. And this OLAP processor provides certain calculation logic for BW queries. And that's why many customers need to reuse this logic and this calculations, this OLAP functionality. And very common, for example, is specific currency translation. Like if you do, let's say, business in multiple countries and you would like to do currency conversion to a fixed date, like how was euro and dollar to exchange rate on, let's say, 1st of May. You might have certain requirements like stock coverage, and of course, analysis authorizations is very important. That's why many customers would like to reuse BW queries, but use Power BI. And that's why we are providing a certified connector for Power BI to connect to BW, as well as a certified connector for BW for HANA. And then if you are connecting to it, it looks quite familiar. And now let's say we will do some more hands-on or a deep dive demo, how this connectivity works. So I already did some setup for this demo landscape. So if you would like to connect against a BW or a BW application server, you would have to maintain your server, your hostname or IP address and so on, also known stuff for a SAP system. But what is important to understand, there are two kinds of connectivity modes. One is an import mode and one is a direct query. And what I will do now is to demonstrate how this looks in practice and what is the difference. And that's why I have to switch now to my virtual machine. Just a second. And here I'm connected to a BW system. As you can see here, like it's a SAP lab system provided by our fast track colleagues. I'm seeing multiple, it's called info areas. And one info area is this so-called NetWeaver Demos data model. We have certain info cubes, which is a data store, and we have BW queries. And I've chosen one query, which is, let's say, monthly sales by product group. And I've as well selected this check mark to make it available for OLEDB for OLAP, which is the prerequisite for consuming this BW query with Power BI. So this is where typically where a BW consultant or let's say developer works. We have certain so-called info providers. We have all this SAP specific, let's say, data modeling like sales group, certain key figures, statistics, sales organization divisions, all those, let's say, very well-known standard data objects for modeling in BW. And if it comes, let's say, to BW, this is where I've spent a lot of time during my career as a consultant. So I created a lot of BW queries. And this is already quite nostalgic. This is the Beck's query designer. But however, just to demonstrate like what is important for let's say BW users or customer, we have something here, which is a product hierarchy. And if typically your end users are working with BW data, you would have something like a hierarchy here. Product hierarchy here, and this is important to understand. These are the typical specifics of BW. Like you have a time-dependent hierarchy. Like your product hierarchy changes on a monthly basis, or even your sales, the assignment of your sales representatives to sales areas might change over a year, or let's say the assignment of sales representatives to product groups might change in between the year. And that's why we have different kind of hierarchies depending on your time frame. And if we click here, now I have a hierarchy over my product hierarchy. And this is very common and very well known for BW and SAP customers. If they build reporting, they would like to report on their hierarchies. They won't like to report on your hierarchy depending on the months, the quarter, and so on. And this is very important if you are doing reporting on top of BW. BW users love their hierarchies and they want to reuse those hierarchies in their Power BI reporting. If you would like to reuse your BW queries in Power BI, we have to choose the direct connection. So if you are connecting against your BW system, this is something which I already have prepared here. I went for the direct connection option because the direct connection directly connects against the BW query and reuses your SAP authorization concept and communicates via the MDX protocol. And this is, from my perspective, important to understand that what I have now here on the right-hand side are the one-to-one objects, the technical, the info objects, which I'm as well using in my BW query. So everybody who is familiar with the query objects in the BW query designer is able to reuse them and to recognize them. And as well, I have an option, as you can see here, I have the region hierarchy in place. So what I'm able to do now here, I already dragged the region hierarchy, and I'm now able to nicely slice and dice and to browse over my, in this case, it's my regional hierarchy, not my product hierarchy, but it's the same, let's say, logic behind. I'm now able to, let's say, drag and drop and slice and dice my objects here, and I could, for example, go for plant and at a plant level or something in the columns and see how this works. However, this would be something how a typical end user would work with BW. They have their info objects in place, they have the hierarchies in place, and you are able to directly work on top of your BW query.
If that's all.
Yeah.
Sorry, Roman, and that's all now really live, right? I mean,
Exactly.
since this is the direct query, when there would be a change now in the SAP system, I would immediately see the changes also here in my Power BI report.
Exactly, it's directly connected to the BW source systems with a SAP ABAP user, so to say, and every time you do refresh, you will see the latest data of your BW system, and you're having those, let's say, BW specific features like queries and then certain calculation options. If you are a Power BI expert, you might already have noticed that something is missing here. That I'm working directly on the query and just having the report option, because I used the direct query mode. I didn't use the import mode. Because there's another option, which is the so-called import mode. What you already addressed, Holger, that if I'm using the import mode, where I'm again connecting against a BW query, but I'm not using the live connectivity, I'm importing the result of the BW query or of a BW to Power BI. You already might notice there's a small difference in, let's say, how the objects are named. So this already looks, I would call it's flattened. You see this sales organization. So this is some kind of a trade-off. The hierarchy is not here anymore, but it's flattened. And I have this nice option now again to do data modeling in Power BI. I even would have the option to import tables from a totally different system, which might not be BW, but I don't know, Oracle database or something. And I now have the option to use all those nice Power BI features like data wrangling, data transformations to prepare the data as an end user. I could create my own data model here and create some relationships. And this is something which probably a lot of Power BI users will like as well, because here you have the full power and full flexibility of Power BI, doing transformations, data modeling, merging multiple data sources from different systems together. With the trade-off, it's, let's say, imported. So I have to take care of the frequent refresh, so to say, of the data. And I don't have the full, let's say, functionality of a BW query supported as compared to a direct query. These are the two options. One is import, which gives you the full flexibility and power of Power BI with the trade-off of this, let's say, refresh. Or you are using the direct query mode with full support of BW authorization concepts and full and support of BW query features like hierarchies. So this would be, let's say, the starting point if you would like to reuse your existing investments into BW and you would like to, let's say, use BW as a data source. This would be the first step or the first option for our customers and their partners. Okay. Next step. First of all, would be direct queries or direct, let's say, Power BI on top of BW. The next option would be to extract data from SAP. For extracting data, I already presented Data Factory last time. So Data Factory is a Azure service which comes with connectors for SAP. I would say the most common ones I would recommend to use are the table connector for extracting data from SAP tables, and in case you would like to consume data which is transformed, prepared already in BW, BW Open Hub would be another option to extract data from a data warehousing layer. So depending on your scenario, depending on, let's say, your customer environment, you might want to extract data from your data warehouse. For example, data which is not available anymore in your transactional system because it got archived, for example. You have far more time or a longer time series available here, or you would like to, let's say, export the lowest level of granularity, like really raw transactional data. For both scenarios, we have support in Data Factory and Azure Synapse Analytics as well. And this was my starting point. This is more or less a supporting slide for the GitHub tutorial, where I said, okay, again, I would like to create something which is reusable from our partners. So I would like to build something on a common data model, so to say. And for me, the S-Flight model was quite convenient to use. So I decided to build a small demo environment using the S-Flight model because it's well known, it's quite simple. And this was a good starting point for me to really demonstrate what is possible with an Azure Synapse Analytics. So today it won't be a Azure Synapse Analytics demonstration or presentation, but Azure Synapse is a analytics service or Azure Synapse Analytics that brings together data integration, enterprise data warehousing, and big data analytics. And what is, from my perspective, very important to emphasize and to understand that it's integrated. So I have a unified experience using Azure Synapse Analytics Studio, which I will present later on, for data ingestion, exploration, management, and I even have the option to use serverless as a, let's say, consumption mode for SQL-based modeling. And this is what I would wanted to understand myself as well, how this works with SAP data. But in addition to create a repeatable scenarios for partners and customers, not on productive data, but on a, let's say, demo environment, which is easy to reproduce to a certain extent. That's why my idea was to cut, let's say, the complex elephant into smaller pieces, because this is just a placeholder for a SAP ERP data model. But in practice, we even have far more tables here, which we would have to take care of. That's why the S-Flight sample application is quite convenient to use. We have a business partner, airline carriers, flights, and bookings. Not that complex, let's say, to remodel again. And that's why I've decided to define 3 personas, which are users or, let's say, involved in this demo scenario. One is Bianca Basis. So she's a basis administrator working with the SAP ERP system. So being responsible to keep it up and running 24/7. As well as a contact person for doing changes, like doing a transport or, let's say, creating some new authorizations which are required. For example, if you would like to use certain services with Azure Data Factory, we have Sabrina SAP, who is a domain expert in SAP data models and data modeling. She has a strong background in SQL and data engineering, Power BI expert, and as well as a contact person for the line of business users and in terms of reporting requirements and specific support questions. And there's Daniel Data Science, who is a specialist or an expert in data science. He's fluent in Scala and Python, and he creates machine learning models on top of SAP data. But he is not a SAP domain expert. So he has to build on top of, let's say, the models which are provided by Sabine for his machine learning models, which is not that uncommon in practice, I would say. That specific SAP domain knowledge and data models is something which you have to somehow combine with your data science expert knowledge. And it's more typical to build on top of predefined data models than reinventing the wheel. So what I've decided is that we have quite basic use cases as a starting point, and we will extend it step by step. And the first one is data discovery and data exploration. To really understand what is in the SAP data model, maybe what are my custom fields in the SAP system, like the set fields. What are the empty and filled columns in my source data? What columns are, for example, suitable for change data capture, or even what columns are, let's say, a good candidate for partition criteria. So that was, let's say, the first idea for this demo environment, to really do data discovery and data exploration for your SAP data, even to create some, let's say, first mock-ups or prototypes to talk to your business how your reporting should look after the final implementation. And let's say from a technical overview, this is, let's say, a detailed demonstration of the architecture. Again, like for Power BI as well, we are using a self-hosted integration runtime, which does again the connectivity to your SAP source system, which could run on Azure or on premises using the .NET connector. And in this case, we are using Azure Synapse pipelines instead of Azure Data Factory, which is still a data pipeline. And we are copying the data from the source system to a Azure blob storage or Azure data lakes as Parquet files, which are, let's say, compressed columnar formats. On top, after data ingestion using pipelines, we have SQL views in Azure Synapse serverless pools. So we don't do data duplications. We just create SQL views on top of your files in your storage. And on top of those SQL views, there will be direct queries again. So no data duplication to Power BI. I will be able to directly query data on my blob storage or data lake storage without any data duplication using Azure serverless pools, which means on request as a serverless component. And in addition, we have Apache Spark data frames for creating Apache Spark notebooks. So this would be the overall setup. And let's say from a story flow from my presentation, what I will show after this PowerPoint, we have multiple steps. So the first step is creating and executing the Synapse pipeline for fetching the SAP tables. After this, I will create those serverless pool SQL views. Those SQL views will be consumed in Power BI as direct query. So I'm directly working on the files stored in your blob storage, and I will present a Power BI report. And additionally, there's as well a Spark notebook for creating some data science specific insights. So it's not machine learning, but I'm using some Python libraries to, let's say, do some advanced data visualizations. Okay. Again, like Holger already mentioned, those steps are described in this GitHub example to make it repeatable. And now I'm connected to the Azure Synapse Analytics workspace. Like I already mentioned, it's an integrated workspace for analytics, data ingestion, as well for visualization. And the first thing I'm doing, or I would have to do, like a good cooking show, I had to prepare something. I would need to ingest data from my SAP system. And the most convenient way is to use the so-called copy data tool. So I will do a built-in copy task. I will connect against my SAP tables connector, which is my SAP system in the background. And now it takes some time. And let's see how long it takes. Because, short question to the group, what would you guess how many tables will I have to select, or how many tables are provided for selection here? So he's connecting against the SAP S/4HANA system, and he now scans all tables which are available. So what is your guess? How many tables are available now?
So all the tables, not only the S-Flight tables, but really all the tables in the S.
Correct.
This SAP multiply with 100.
Yes.
I don't know.
Probably
I don't have a feeling. I don't know. Maybe not more than 10, probably. Yeah. Or?
So that's why it takes some time. I mean, it's always like SAP is slow.
Yeah.
So sometimes you know why. Because I'm getting.
Oh my God.
No, man.
260,000. Okay.
Oh God.
But Roman, did you say this is an S4 system, or is this?
This is an S4 system, yeah.
You are getting old. I was thinking that you are getting just subset of table. I know all tables. Oh, okay, I know.
It's all tables, and this is really convenient because I mean, you have something to build something where you now are able to search and to work on, let's say, 260,000 tables. Okay, let's do a test because now I have to.
This is just connection to one system, and you are receiving the list of all tables in that system.
Correct.
Okay, now I get it. Okay.
And now it's S-book, like the flight book, and now I'm getting a nice preview already. Like
so basically the content, it's also pre-selected, I mean, during those initial selection process, isn't it? Not just the tables, but
yeah, it's just what it's just the tables and the content of the tables. It's not like the financial model. If somebody mentions content, you would think something like, I would like to replicate my controlling content or my finance content, and you are not able to say, okay, I would like to have all tables which belong to controlling. Not yet. But next week we have Bartosz. Maybe we will see some answers there. However, I'm now able to, let's say, conveniently search over this quite large number of tables, right? Because I'm just I'm able to search for the name, and it's, as you can see, quite convenient and fast to use. And what I'm doing now, I would now have to select those, I would say, 10 tables which belong to S-Flight, which would take long. But just as a starting point, I'm connected against the SAP source system. I'm able to browse through the tables and select and to preview them for data replication.
Yep.
Data replication then is a so-called data replication pipeline. Here's some, let's say, logic in the background to make this more dynamic. And after doing, let's say, the replication job, so I would have to run this data replication pipeline, and people knowing Data Factory will know it looks quite equal to Azure Data Factory, what I'm able to do here. I'm getting those Parquet files on my storage container. So I'm now connected to my Azure Data Lake, to my Data Lake storage. I have a folder which is called SAP S-Flight, and in this folder I have all tables which are relevant for my S-Flight data model. Stored as compressed Parquet files, and it's, let's say, even the one data set is 44 megabytes, so it's not the smallest demo scenario you could work on. So it's already a couple of million records are in there. Okay, now I would like to create reporting on top of those tables, right? So I would like to create a data model. I would like to join tables. I would like to define the fact table and the dimension table and so on. And the first prerequisite after loading the data from SAP to the Azure Data Lake using a Synapse pipeline is then doing a SQL script. And this SQL script does nothing else, more or less, than creating database views or serverless pools on top of those Parquet files, which are stored on my Azure Data Lake. So I just have to say, please create a view.
Okay.
Doing a select statement, yeah, even a select star. And I don't have to define the schema, which is very important to know and to understand. If I would have something like a traditional database, I would have to say, hey, column number 1 is a, I don't know, integer, column number 2 is a varchar, size, you know, all the stuff, which would be quite some effort. And using this open row set command and a select star, I'm able to dynamically create those views based on the data types which are maintained in the Parquet file.
But if I know the columns, I can also, instead of using star, the specify columns and just extract that part of the data, not all columns. Can I do
Correct.
that? Okay. Okay.
But you don't have to define the data model or data type.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Because this would be quite some work to find out. I've seen those thousands of tables with hundreds of columns. Creating manually a DDL statement, how we would call it in a database, would take some time. And this is why I said it's more like an exploration case, because it's very fast, very explorative to create just some views on top of my exported SAP tables. And now I have them available for the full power of Synapse. So what I could do now, let me try something.
Because from now on, you will work on the actual views. So, exactly. Okay.
Now I could go here and create a new SQL script, select the first top row. So I will do something different. I will do a select star count. And I will just count how many records are in the SQL view. And remember, it's
1.3 million.
It just took 6 seconds to fully scan the Parquet files and to find out that 1.3 million records are in there.
Cool.
And it's quite a small demo environment to save costs. So it even does scale, I would say. And this is something which makes it already quite usable, I would say, not having to duplicate data now into Synapse by creating physical tables.
And I guess for me as a user now, I mean, I would just perform these select statements on the different views, but actually, obviously, the views would not only contain data from SAP, they could also contain data from other sources and stuff like that. And for me as the user here, yeah, I would just work with the data regardless of where it's coming from.
Exactly. So it could be multiple SAP systems. It could be Dynamics 365 SAP. And so I could write my SQL statements and join tables, so to say. So
nice. Across different data sources then.
Exactly. So if I'm not, let's say, very familiar with SQL, I have another option, because this is the question, like, where do I add metadata to SAP? And now Power BI comes into play. Because again, here I created direct connections from Power BI to Synapse. So I did not import the data. I again did create direct queries. And those direct queries are again pointing against the data lake, using serverless pools as SQL engine, so to say. And now, because I've spoken about the personas, my SAP domain expert, or in general my data model expert, is now able to create a data model by doing joins and defining the relationship between those tables. And here I was able, let's say, to graphically rebuild the S-Flight data model and to define this data model, which could be as well applied to SAP data models in general, like sales order and sales header and this known stuff. But in general, here I'm now able to create a specific data model. I'm able, let's say, to rename the columns, add calculated key figures or calculated columns, and let's say maintain and enrich the semantics, right? So I could rename the column if it doesn't fit and so on. And here, after doing the data model, of course, it's quite convenient to build a nice looking dashboard or report, again, directly pointing to the data lake.
But Roman, just for me again, for clarification. So now with Power BI, you are connecting to the views that you had created in Synapse. So the first thing is really create the views in Synapse, and then Power BI, I guess, has a possibility to directly connect to the views that were previously created.
Correctly.
Nice. Okay.
So here's the view, and here's the direct query, and again, in the background, it fetches the data from Azure Data Lake Storage.
Cool.
And these views, as you mentioned, these views, the source of the views can be data lake, but can be also some live SQL server somewhere or somewhere.
Should be there's something like a database link.
Okay.
I think there's one here. You can see it here, linked service.
Okay.
And I could say here SQL database, external data. I could link.
Okay.
So yeah, and here I'm linked to Azure Data Lake Storage.
Cool.
And since it's integrated, develop, I even don't have to leave my Synapse Analytics workspace. I even have the Power BI report in here.
Okay.
So
you are in this Synapse Studio. This is Synapse Studio, what you mentioned before.
Exactly.
Okay.
Azure Synapse Analytics workspace. And here it's real time now, right? So it's really now refreshing the data and fetching the data from the source. And again, I even have the option to maintain the query and so the dashboard or the report in Synapse in the web user interface without leaving the Synapse Analytics workspace, which is data integration, data modeling, and reporting or BI analytics report creation in a single user interface.
Really nice.
One last thing. Because this was, let's say, your standard reporting and let's say common data warehousing, hello world, how to display SAP data. But now we come to the new world, which is very important for many of our customers, which is, let's say, very common if you speak to data scientists. They are typically using Spark, which is a massive parallel execution engine for data science workloads. Many of them are using their favorite Python libraries, like Pandas or PySpark. And here, again, I'm not a data scientist, but it is quite convenient to use. I've created a Spark notebook because Spark is integrated as well in Synapse. And okay, no, he's not started. Now it takes some time.
So notebook is something like project in Spark or what?
Yeah, so this is something, imagine you're doing like your PhD thesis. You're writing your master or bachelor work, and you're doing, let's say, the documentation of your experiments as a notebook. So I could write here, this is my thesis. I've created some calculation to prove that this and that might happen based on my calculations. And so I'm able to document my, let's say, assumptions and my scientific works using this notebook, and directly able to execute my data science algorithms within this notebook. So typically, if you have a look at more best practice style of notebooks, you will see a lot of text to read this, explain and to describe what you're doing in your data science stuff. And here, this is more like a basic Hello World style example where I'm importing some libraries, which is pandas or Python libraries, and I'm doing some, let's say, charting and graphs based again on the S-Flight tables, which are based on the Azure Data Lake. Okay, now while it's running, so I'm just dropping my first database, creating a new database or database table using my S-Booking Parquet file again, like similar pattern we did with Azure Synapse serverless pool, but I changed my language. So the processing engine now is PySpark with Python. And I'm now able to execute or to create a Spark table. I'm able to use, if I'm, let's say, efficient with SQL, I could do again some SQL queries on top of my Spark tables. But what I found, let's say, more relevant, especially when doing some more advanced analytics scenarios, I'm as well able to create, let's say, some advanced visualizations using Python libraries like Seaborn or Pandas. And here, with a couple of lines of coding, I'm able, for example, to see what is, let's say, the ticket price distribution in my booking table. So as you can see here now, we have quite a low distribution of tickets which are over, let's say, $3,000, but a very high distribution. As you remember, we had a couple of millions of bookings or in the tables, and a very high distribution of ticket prices in the area, I would say, is probably above 750 euro or something. And as you can see, the most tickets are sold in the area below $1,000. The next one, again, similar pattern. Now I'm doing some advanced analytics about the price distribution per plane type. Not sure if it makes sense in practice, but just to demonstrate what kind of options are available. That here I can see it's a Airbus 747. No, it's a Boeing. I think it's not Airbus, but it's a A340-600. And now I can see with those nice candles that a certain distribution for those planes is starting at 400 and going up to 1,000, and the average is somewhere here. So this is something which I could do on prices, or let's say similar patterns. And just for, let's say, demonstration purposes, I have taken the plane type as criteria to let's say do some exploration or some analytics about the ticket price distribution per plane type. And this would be, let's say, the last aspect of the scenario. So I've presented data integration from SAP using the copy job, or let's say the pipeline. I've presented how to create database views on top of those Parquet files for being able to use SQL on top of those Parquet files. I've shown how I could now create data models using directories and Power BI. And for more advanced use cases on data exploration with SAP, I've as well presented a notebook using Spark. And that's it from my side. Hopefully until next time.
Really impressive, Roman. Just one last question, because, for example, I am really not very familiar with Python and how to create such a script there. All of this is documented in your GitHub repository, right?
Exactly, yeah. So I will even upload the notebook, but yes, in general, as you can see here,
Great.
the Python, let's say, commands are maintained here, and I will as well publish the notebook as well. Or just get in touch with me. You will reach me via LinkedIn in case you would like to work on those topics.
Perfect. Well, great. I think this was a really detailed overview of how to get started. I also really like the story, how you really showed all the different pillars, all the different steps that are required to get this data in. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks for the invitation. And as I already mentioned, I heard next time Bartosz and Marius will be here.
Well, not next week actually, but I think the week after that.
Okay, perfect. Because the data experts and data geeks will now say, hey, you just did a full load. Where's the delta load and the complex stuff with BW systems? And I would like to duplicate data models and not just tables. And I will say that those guys have a good answer to those questions as well. I'm looking forward to this presentation.
Great, cool. So nice teaser for, again, I think not next week, but the week after that. So stay tuned.
Okay.
Perfect. With this, I think we're done for the day. A little longer this time. I hope it was very useful. So thank you very much. Thank you, Roman, for joining. And see you next week again. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.